Okay, welcome to another video. A few people have asked me to do more videos on the Indian Scout bobber. One of the common questions has been, does it make sense to get an Indian Scout bobber as your first bike, perhaps after moving from a 125 or a 250? That's what I did, so I'll talk to you a little bit in this video about whether I think the Indian Scout bobber is a good first big bike. Okay, so to provide some context, if you haven't watched the other videos on my channel, I got my Indian Scout bobber in January 2020, and so yeah, it's, where are we, middle of October now, so it's been a fair few months, and I went from a Mutt Motorcycles Fat Sabbath 125 straight to this. I was a little bit unsure about doing that myself, because basically going from a 125 to basically a 1200cc bike. But originally the reason I got my motorbike license was to buy a Harley Davidson Speedster 48 until I found out about these, and then I fell in love with this. So we will jump on the bike in a minute and go for a ride. So I've got a couple of errands to run, so I'll talk a bit more about some of the things as we're riding along. But I'll talk about, I guess, the first couple of things that, I guess, the key things to consider. I do think this is a good bike for your first big bike for some reasons which we'll talk about, but I'll talk about some of the kind of, not negatives, just things to keep in mind. First of all, it's quite an expensive bike. So obviously when you're first moving onto a bigger motorcycle, it's not unfeasible that you may fall off or drop it or just do something stupid. So keep that in mind. Obviously, a more expensive bike, you drop it, do something, it's going to cost you more money to get it fixed. Another thing which I will try and demonstrate in a moment, just by standing next to the bike. One of the things I first noticed was, after kind of being on the 125 and obviously doing my license, when you're doing the off-road, well, not off-road, off the bike manoeuvring, so you're moving in and out of spaces, the one thing that you'll find with the bobber is obviously it's very low slung, so it's hard, a little bit harder to manage the weight. So I'll try and show you what I mean. So that's normally on another bike you might be pushing up here or something, whereas you've got to kind of handle it down here, so it just makes it a little bit more unwieldy. Yes, it's just a little bit more unwieldy to try and manoeuvre because of where you'd put your hands. Obviously, because it is relatively low as well, you can find when you go around corners, it's very easy to scrape the pegs, so it's not a bike that you're really going to be leaning into, but it's a cruiser. It's not designed for that, so you probably shouldn't be doing that anyway. And then the only other thing that takes a little bit getting used to, but really no time at all, is the front controls. So obviously it's more like you're sat in an armchair when riding along, as opposed to, you know, on a more sportier conventional motorcycle, you've got your legs and your feet directly under you, whereas on the Scout bobber you're kind of sat out like that. And obviously there is different handlebars you can get. I like these handlebars. I'm not really a big fan of the apes, but how you sit on this is much more comfortable, and yeah, I think a more relaxing ride. The visibility is really good on a bobber as well, so that's one thing I do notice compared to other bikes. I have the mirror still in the upright position. Some people do move them down, but I don't really like that. But yeah, you get good visibility, which is great, especially when you first pass your test. And the thing that I do like about it is it's a big engine, but it's not a racing machine. It can go fast if you want it to, but it doesn't kind of out the box try and kind of rip you off the seat unless you really try and make it do that. So it's a very comfortable position to be riding in. Again, because it's so low, you can easily get your foot flat on the floor, not a problem. I'm 5'10" and very easily get my feet on the floor, which you've seen in some of my other videos. I guess the only other bad thing, again, it's the style of the bike. It's not a fault of the bike itself, is there's nowhere to put anything. There's no room under that seat. It's hard enough to get that seat on and off when you're trying to get to the fuse panels, and the little side bag does kind of help, but it's not that great. So I have my rucksack on pretty much most of the time on this bike, unless I'm just going for a gentle ride somewhere. So let's jump on the bike and we'll talk a bit more about some of the things why I think this is a good bike. Okay, so I'm hoping that you can hear me okay. The old the road mic connected up. We'll have to make a petrol stop. Let's just see how many. Yeah. Okay. Right. So I fucking up a little bit. This is where we find out if I'm gonna run out of fuel on this trip. So that's one of the things I guess I should start off with. I will do a list in a different video of the 5 things I like and the 5 things I don't like about this bike. But one of those, as a spoiler, is the fact that there's no fuel tank indicator. All you have is a little light that basically tells you probably need to put some fuel in there. So you have to guess or open up the tank and have a look in there, but you're not really going to do that. Not easily anyway. So yeah, this is a great first bike, really low centre of gravity, and the one thing I found most when I moved from my motorcycle Fat Sabbath 125, just how easy it was to manoeuvre a bigger bike. Having that extra power and actually the extra weight, to me, made it much easier to manoeuvre, and it then just provides much more confidence in your riding ability, I find. And you just feel like, you know, you feel like you got much more road presence. The Fat Sabbath I had, even though it was a small bike, it felt like a bigger bike. It had more road presence. And I have to admit, you know, when I first passed my test, I didn't really go much over 50 for 2 reasons. One, the 125 started to get pretty much gutless once you got to 50, but also I crapped myself. And it just, again, it just comes with experience. But with the larger bike, obviously you have the ability to keep up with traffic. You don't feel like you're holding anybody up. It just, yeah, and this is a really good bike to do that on. It gets lots of positive attention, I find. A couple of people don't like the fact they've got the really loud exhaust on, and that's just personal preference. I'm not riding in kind of towns and villages, in enclosed areas, I mean, so I'm not kind of annoying everybody. And like right now, I don't know what time it is. It's after 9 o'clock anyway, and so I always make sure that I don't go out early on this bike, so I don't want to annoy my neighbours or anything. In terms of other things that are quite good about this bike, is it's pretty fuel efficient, really. My 125, you never seem to need to fill that up, and this feels similar in a way. It's not a massive tank, and I've done 133.5 miles since I last filled up, which is pretty good. And again, it needs to be filled up again, so probably by the time I get to the petrol station, assuming we don't have a fuel catastrophe, then, you know, it probably would have done about 140, something like that. The brakes are reasonable on this bike. I wouldn't say they're pretty good. I had a brake recall that I had to take the bike in for recently due to some concerns from Indian that some of the bikes had air in the brake fluid, and the brakes are definitely better since having that done. They are a little bit more confidence expiring. It's not the brakes are terrible, and I didn't really notice, I guess,
how bad they were, and I mean that in a constructive way, until I got my CBR 1000. Oh, the brakes on that are amazing compared to this. But yeah. So going back to what I said, so now we're into the 60. If you want to get this bike some beans, it'll do it. It's very capable, but it doesn't, you know, it's not a bike designed to go fast on, because you don't have any windscreen. You're just getting buffeted with the air. So it's just not what it's designed for. But it can go fast if you want to, and you've got a big strong chest to get pummeled with the air on it. But I've used it on the motorway a few times. It's not super enjoyable. That's probably a confidence thing as well. I do try and go on the motorway at least once every time I go out, just so that I can kind of build an experience on that, really. But yeah, I feel like I'm waffling like I normally do in my videos. But the short version is, I just think this is a good first big bike, apart from the cost, and again the adjustment of moving a little bit to the forward facing or front, I don't know the proper word for it, front mounted footrests. So if you look down there, you can see that's where your feet go, and again, because it's quite low, you can't lean over too much, but you don't really need to lean over too much anyway unless you're going super fast. The other thing that's good about this bike, for someone who's new and you're trying to think about everything, obviously you should be pretty confident by the time you pass your test and everything. It depends on, I guess, how quickly you're doing those things. But you do have the gear readout on the very basic instrument panel there. That does help a little bit. It's a bit odd that it doesn't really know what gear it's in until after you're moving along a little bit, but it just helps that perhaps if you're trying to get your head around what's going on and you come up to a roundabout and you're in 6 and you're thinking, oh, am I in 6, am I in 4? I don't know. You can look down, see what gear you're in, so you know how many gears you might want to drop down or something. But that's good. It is a very basic instrument panel as well. It's obviously in keeping with the styling. There's not really too much to see on there. You can see your revs, you can see how many miles you've done for the trip, how many miles on the odometer, and you control all that. There's a little switch just behind its kind of left-hand control cluster, just near the clutch, and that just cycles through down the bottom here. So it's pretty straightforward, really. There's no button to flash. That's what I thought that button was at first. I thought that was the flashing button. So if you want to kind of let someone know you're there, or flash them to pull out in front of you like we do here in the UK, but it isn't. That's the computer cycling button. So if you want to flash someone, you've got to push your lights on and off. But no, I think it's a good first bike. You are going to have to pay a little bit of a premium for, well, if you decide to take it to Indian, I guess, for your servicing, there will be a premium on servicing costs, because it's a more premium brand. It's no different to buying a BMW versus a Fiat or something, I guess. But no, I like it. It's very easy to ride. Kind of sit down with your legs akimbo. We go through the little twisty bits, through the villagey bits. Also means I won't scare the horses. So here we go, so I'm going into this corner. You don't move over too much. That's another good thing, actually, I guess, for your first big bike. The fact that you do have indicator signals on your instrument cluster, so hopefully minimise the chances if you leave your indicators on. And yeah, it's a lot safer that way, because you don't want to be indicating when you're not indicating, and then some pillock pulls out in front of you. So I don't really know if there's too much more for me to say other than I think it's a great bike, and yeah, I would definitely consider one as your first bike. If this is the type of style bike that you're after. So the other bike I considered was a Honda CB650R, because I like that Neo Cafe sports racer style thing as well, but very different bikes. And I would say this bike is easier to ride than something like that, than a kind of upright sports bike-ish. But again, they're very different bikes. This bike is easier. Is it easier? I don't know. Just the other day, and we're going off a little tangent now, but that's what I do. I was riding this bike to the Crazy Horse farmhouse to get my first, not my first service, to get the brakes looked at for that recall. And I remember thinking to myself, I really like this bike. Do I like this bike more than my Honda CB1000R? And then my brain said, but you're very fortunate you don't got to make that decision, because you're fortunate to have both of them. I think that's the thing. Different bikes for different things, and different styles of riding, different things that you like. So I guess the best advice to anyone is, whatever big bike you're looking at getting, go and test ride it. Be careful, be sensible, but definitely don't discount this as your first bike thinking that it's a big 1200 beast. Obviously the downside will be that you may have slightly higher insurance, and it's obviously because it costs more. But if you're thinking about spending this kind of money anyway, then don't discount it. They are great bikes, and yeah, this was my first bike, and I had this game from January until I think it was July that I was fortunate enough to get my Honda CB1000R as well. So yeah, I'm waffling. I'm going to finish. Leave comments down below, ask any questions you have. I hope this video was kind of helpful. Yeah, go test ride it. It makes sense. Now let's just hope I don't run out of petrol.
Thanks for watching this video. A thumbs up would be really appreciated. If you're interested in other geek type videos, please consider subscribing to Spectrum Geeks. Why not also follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And before you leave, why don't you check out one of these other videos that may be of interest. Thanks again for watching.